The streets outside buzzed with life, but inside her high-rise office, silence followed every step Madison took. People stood straighter. Eyes shifted with quiet respect. Drivers paused to open doors, assistants whispered updates, and cameras flashed anytime she appeared. Her name moved things. She didn't have to say much. Her presence did the talking. Her homes, her companies, her cars, everything about her screamed wealth. Board members leaned in closer when she spoke. Investors nodded before she finished a sentence. She was Lady Madison. People didn't just admire her, they wanted to be her. But behind the power, behind the calm nods and graceful waves, shadows grew quietly. Emily, her elder sister, sipped fresh juice from a glass as she flipped through a magazine in one of Madison's living rooms. Her designer heels tapped the floor gently, her eyes occasionally glancing around at the luxurious decor. She smiled, but her fingers tightened around the glass. Her laughter came too quickly, her compliments a little too shiny. While Madison hosted meetings and signed million-dollar deals, Emily was catching flights to Paris, setting up fashion houses with her sister's contacts, and showing off her connections at elite parties. But her heart twisted with every success Madison achieved. She smiled at the camera, but behind every post, jealousy burned. One evening, Emily rested her handbag on the couch and turned to her sister with an expression too calm to be casual. "Madison," she said, smoothing out her blouse, "you need to protect yourself. People are watching. All this money, it attracts enemies. You need someone spiritual, a pastor who can pray for you, stand in the gap." Madison leaned back in her seat, a brow raised, half amused. "You want me to pause everything and start going to church?" Emily chuckled softly, then leaned forward, her voice low and convincing. "If you want to enjoy all this for years to come, you'll do it. I know someone, Pastor Victoria. Her church is different. People go there and return with testimonies. She's not ordinary, Madison. You can't do this on your own." Madison didn't argue. She simply sat there, eyes fixed on her sister. A long pause passed before she nodded slowly. A week later, the church doors swung open and Madison walked in, flanked by Emily. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Ushers rushed forward with wide smiles and guided her to a padded chair near the front. It wasn't just a seat, it was a throne, reserved for her alone. Pastor Victoria, a woman in flowing robes and confident steps, spotted Madison and grinned. She moved toward her with open arms, her voice echoing through the mic. "God is about to lift you higher," she said, laying hands lightly on Madison's shoulder. "Sow a seed. Big seed. There are curses to break." Soon, 10 million vanished into offering baskets. Then another 15. Then 20. Madison's hands didn't hesitate. Every week, new reasons came. Evil eyes, business attacks, spiritual dangers. And she paid without blinking. Emily's voice kept echoing in her ears. "Don't joke with this, Madison. Everything you've built, it could disappear. You're too powerful to be careless." Fear crept in quietly. It wore the mask of faith. Madison didn't notice the difference. Pastor Victoria began calling directly. No more waiting for Sundays. She summoned Madison for private prayers, late-night revelations, sudden dreams that needed urgent sowing. And each time, Madison reached for her checkbook. She changed. She stopped approving company projects without calling Pastor Victoria. When partners called, she said, "Let me pray about it first." Her instincts, the ones that built her empire, sat silent as she chased spiritual instructions instead. Whispers began in her office. "She's harder to reach. She won't move unless the pastor says so." Clients pulled out. Projects slowed down. Still, Madison didn't flinch. She believed she was fighting invisible wars. Then came a knock on the gate. Her brother, Eric, walked in with his wife Lucy. Lucy placed a hand over her heart as she greeted her. Respect filled her eyes. That evening, Madison's mansion didn't feel so quiet. Plates clinked. Lucy helped arrange the dishes like it was her own home. But Emily stood by the window, arms folded. Her face stiffened every time Lucy spoke. Later, she pulled Madison aside, her voice sharp beneath a sweet tone. "Lucy's fake. I can feel it. Don't trust her too much. She's here for something. You'll see." Madison didn't argue, but her eyes darkened. 2 days later, Lucy stepped into Madison's study, holding a brown file close to her chest. Her voice was low, respectful. "Auntie, I studied human resources. I've been job hunting with no success. If there's anything you can help with, I'd truly appreciate it. Madison took the file without looking at it. She set it on the table and nodded once. Drop your CV there. I'll see what I can do. Lucy's eyes lit up with hope. She whispered a thank you and stepped out. But Madison's hand didn't reach for the file again. It just sat there. Emily's voice swirled again in her mind, mixing doubt with suspicion. Her smile faded, and slowly, she began to see Lucy not as a sister-in-law, but as a threat. That evening, Madison gripped the file tightly in her hands as she made her way to Pastor Victoria's office. The dim light from the desk lamp flickered slightly as she set the file down in front of the pastor, who immediately closed her eyes and placed both hands on it. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she began to murmur words of prayer. After a few moments, Pastor Victoria pulled her hands away, a deep frown etched on her face. "This woman is bad news," she muttered, her voice laced with concern. "She carries a destiny of competition, and the Lord says that if you help her, you will regret it for the rest of your life. She will replace you and become richer, even while you live a life of suffering. Block every door to her breakthrough, or else you will suffer." The next morning, Madison picked up the CV and handed it to her assistant with cold precision. "Do not hire her," she said, her tone firm and final. She paused before adding, "And make sure nobody else hires her either. Do whatever it takes." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Each time Lucy or her brother asked about the job, Madison would smile politely, her voice warm. "I'm working on it," she would say. But behind the polite mask, she worked tirelessly to ensure that Lucy never received any opportunity in the city. Lucy spent years unemployed, juggling various menial jobs to make ends meet. Her hands were worn from scrubbing, her feet sore from standing all day. She wiped her brow as she cleaned the house of a neighbor one morning when she noticed a familiar face. Her friend stopped in her tracks, eyes wide in disbelief. "What are you doing cleaning houses when your sister-in-law is giving jobs to people who aren't even related to her?" she asked, voice rising with confusion. "Just the other day, I heard she gave jobs to 5 women on the street." Lucy didn't meet her friend's eyes, instead focusing on wiping her hands on the front of her dress. Her lips twitched slightly as she tried to muster a smile. "Madison must have her reasons. I believe she's doing what she thinks is best." Her friend shook her head, her voice tinged with frustration. "Lucy, how can you defend her after all she's done to you?" Lucy sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "She's under a lot of pressure," she said quietly. "People expect so much from her, forgetting that she's only human." The friend's eyes softened for a moment before she shrugged, offering Lucy a brief smile. "Good luck," she said before turning and walking away. In the quiet of her heart, Lucy still believed in Madison. She clung to the hope that the delay in help was somehow divine timing. Maybe Madison had forgotten. Perhaps she was just too busy. So, Lucy made the decision to visit Madison at her office. She stood in the sleek, cold reception area, nervously glancing at the receptionist who glanced up from her desk. "Madison is out of town," the receptionist said, not looking at her. Lucy hesitated for a moment, then stood up straighter, her voice polite but confused. "But you said she traveled, didn't you?" The receptionist didn't answer, her gaze firmly fixed on her screen, dismissing Lucy completely. Something didn't sit right. Lucy turned, ready to leave, when her gaze caught something unexpected. Madison was walking out of her office, her bag hanging by her side, looking perfectly fine. "Auntie," Lucy called out, rushing toward her. Madison turned sharply, eyes narrowing as if she had been interrupted in the middle of something important. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was icy and sharp, like a blade cutting through the space between them. Lucy took a step forward, trying to steady her breath. Her voice wavered, her nerves apparent. "Auntie, I just came to check on the job you promised." "What?" Madison snapped, louder than before, causing several staff members to stop and glance in their direction. To beg for a job again? To cry and act like a victim? Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She felt as if the floor beneath her was about to crack open. Madison's wrist flicked, pointing directly at her. "Listen to me very carefully, you woman," Madison growled. "All this humility and soft talk? It doesn't move me. I know your type. You came into this family to climb, but I won't let you climb on me." Lucy's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't say anything. Her lips trembled as she tried to explain, her voice barely a whisper. "Auntie, that's not true. I just wanted help with the job. Don't you dare call me auntie." Madison barked, her face twisted in anger. "I'm not your mate. And I'm certainly not your auntie. I don't owe you anything. Do you understand me? You're not entitled to my money or my help." Lucy stood frozen, the silence in the hallway crushing. Every word that Madison spoke seemed to echo, louder than the last. "If I see you anywhere near my house or office again," Madison continued, lowering her voice but sharpening it even more, "I will embarrass you beyond recovery. You should be ashamed of yourself, throwing yourself at me like a beggar." "Auntie," Lucy whispered, her voice breaking, "I never meant to offend you. I only came to check on the progress of the job you promised." "Get out," Madison shouted, her eyes full of cold fury, as she turned on her heel and walked away without another glance back. Lucy stood motionless for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel her dignity crumbling, like the last straw breaking a camel's back. Slowly, her legs began to move, her feet dragging as she left the office. As she walked down the hallway, the weight of what had just happened settled heavily on her shoulders. She tried to blink away the tears, but they came anyway, pouring freely like an unstoppable tide. She couldn't comprehend the reason behind the cruelty she had just faced. In the back of her car, Madison leaned back against the plush seat, her eyes fixed on Lucy as she crossed the street, boarding a tricycle. Her hand reached into her bag, pulling out her phone, dialing a number with deliberate precision. "Pastor Victoria," she said as the phone connected. "You won't believe what just happened." Pastor Victoria's voice crackled through the line, warm and approving. "Well done, daughter of Zion. The Lord is happy with you for protecting your throne. However, the battle is not yet over. You need to send $5 million for special prayers." Without a second thought, Madison immediately transferred the money, her fingers quick on the screen. Over the following months, Madison's presence in the church grew ever more dominant. Her chair, once just a seat among many, now stood apart, regal and imposing. The church even installed a golden plaque on it, the inscription glowing in the light. "Reserved for Her Excellency, Madison." One Sunday morning, as Madison entered the church, she noticed something strange. Her chair, her throne, was covered in a fine white powder. She reached for the cloth, attempting to wipe it away, but as her fingers brushed against it, a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and then she collapsed. Rushed to the hospital, Madison was surrounded by doctors, their voices muffled as they spoke in hushed tones. A series of tests were carried out, each one colder than the last. Finally, the doctor turned to her, his face grave. "Stage 4 cancer of the blood. You have only a few weeks left to live." The world seemed to slow down as the words sank in. Her body grew weaker with every passing day. The news of her failing health spread across the newspapers, her name now a headline. Everyone knew that Madison had only a few weeks left to live. Madison's company was falling apart, and it was evident in the frantic calls she received. Her business partners began to pull away, their fear of her eventual death sinking into their actions. The stock prices of her company nosedived as the market reacted. She could hear the voices on the other end of the phone telling her they were withdrawing their investments, and every word felt like a nail in her coffin. Madison's health deteriorated. Desperation clawed at her as she sat in her bed in the hospital, staring at the sterile walls around her. She picked up the phone and called the pastor. He spoke quickly, almost impatiently, as he told her she was under attack. His words were heavy with urgency. "You must sow a special seed of $1,000 for a 7-day deliverance prayer, or else the sickness will consume you completely." Madison barely thought twice. She paid the money. The sum left her account in a heartbeat, and she held on to the hope that it would bring healing. But the healing didn't come. Weeks passed, and Madison's condition grew worse. She noticed how her once thick, shiny hair now clung to the pillow after every night's rest. It fell out in clumps. Her skin, once glowing, had turned a sickly pale. Weakness crept into her bones, making it difficult to even sit up in bed. Her heart sank as she watched the world around her crumble. The phone rang, and it was from the board of directors. They informed her that they were replacing her. The words felt distant as she listened, her mind struggling to make sense of the loss. Her empire, everything she had built, was slipping away. Her sister, Emily, who had always been close, was nowhere to be found. Madison looked at her phone, staring at the message that read, "I'm in Kampala for a business meeting." Madison's calls went unanswered, and she felt a stab of loneliness. She tried calling the pastor, but he too refused to pick up. Was everyone abandoning her? What Madison didn't know was that Emily and the pastor were working together. They were taking advantage of her vulnerability, setting up a plan she couldn't even begin to understand. Her sister had placed a charm on the chair where Madison usually sat. It was supposed to make Madison follow the pastor's instructions. But when Madison collapsed that day, it was clear the plan hadn't worked. She had been too weak to even sit on the chair. Days blurred into one another. The ceiling above her seemed to close in as she lay in bed, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the hospital door opening. Madison turned her head to see her sister-in-law, Lucy, standing there with a flask in one hand and a bag of fruits in the other. Madison blinked, her eyes focusing on Lucy's face, still unsure if she was dreaming. "What are you doing here?" Madison's voice was weak, barely a whisper. Lucy smiled gently and placed the bag on the table beside the bed. "I heard you weren't feeling too well, Annie. I thought you might need some company." Her voice was soft, soothing, like a balm to the wound of Madison's heart. Madison felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from pain, but from the guilt that consumed her. The memory of that day in the office came rushing back, and it stung her deeply. "I insulted and humiliated you," Madison whispered, her voice thick with regret. Lucy reached out, placing a hand on hers, her smile unwavering. "It's all in the past, Auntie," she said, her tone kind. "I know you were under pressure that day." Madison couldn't believe how understanding Lucy was. She had been so cruel to her, and yet here Lucy was, offering her warmth and forgiveness without hesitation. Desperation gripped Madison as she grabbed her phone from the bedside table. She dialed numbers, one after the other, asking people to help Lucy find a job. She heard the rejections clearly, their cold words cutting through her. The people who once respected her now turned their backs because of her illness. She couldn't believe how far she had fallen. But Lucy stayed. Every morning, without fail, she brought fresh meals and juice for Madison. She cleaned the room, tending to the smallest details. Even when the nurses were around, Lucy took the time to massage Madison's feet, helping her relax. When Madison couldn't speak, Lucy would sit beside her, holding her hand, her presence a silent comfort. The nurses began to notice Lucy's dedication. "That's her sister-in-law," one whispered to another. "She's been coming every day? You'd think she was her daughter." Lucy never mentioned the past. She didn't bring up the humiliation Madison had caused her, nor did she ask for anything in return. She simply loved and cared for Madison, without expecting anything. One night, when Madison was too weak to hold a spoon, Lucy gently fed her. Each spoonful was carefully placed in her mouth, and Lucy wiped her lips with a napkin after each bite. "Why are you doing this for me?" Madison asked, her voice shaky. Lucy smiled softly, her eyes full of love. "Because you're family, Auntie, and because I believe the real you is still in there." For the first time in weeks, a faint, broken smile tugged at Madison's lips. It wasn't long after that moment when Emily reappeared. She walked into the hospital room with a confident stride, dressed in a glittering gown and high heels, as though nothing had changed. "Oh my God, Madison, you look so different," Emily said, her voice dripping with false concern. She walked over to Madison's side and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I've been so busy with business, but I'm here now, and I'll take care of everything." Madison didn't respond. She only nodded weakly. Over the next few days, Emily's actions became more calculated. She made phone calls, not to doctors or caregivers, but to lawyers and estate managers. Madison could hear the sound of Emily's voice as she demanded updates on her properties. Emily insisted that Madison sign over power of attorney. "You never know, Madison," Emily whispered one morning. "Things could go south. Let's put this in place just in case." Madison watched Emily closely. She saw how her sister grew impatient when the doctors entered the room. She noticed how Emily didn't know how to help her sit up in bed, or where the painkillers were kept. Madison felt her sister's true intentions slowly unraveling before her eyes. One morning, as she lay quietly in bed expecting the worst, a young doctor came rushing in, breathless and urgent. "Madison, we are so sorry. There's been a mix-up in your medical records. Her heart skipped. What do you mean? There was a lab error. You do not have cancer. Your blood sample was switched with another patient's. You're suffering from an infection that mimics some symptoms of leukemia, but it's completely treatable. Madison sat up, dazed. I'm not dying. No, ma'am. You're going to be fine. She was discharged 2 weeks later, but she didn't tell anyone. She instructed the hospital staff to keep the news confidential and returned quietly to her mansion. Madison acted weak and fragile, as if death still lingered around the corner. Her sister, Emily, resumed her daily visits, constantly pushing for the signing of documents. She brought in lawyers and even threatened Madison with the company's future if she didn't do the right thing. But Madison waited. And then one day, as Emily laid out documents in front of her, demanding she sign over her estate for the good of the family, Madison slowly pushed herself up from the bed. She looked her sister in the eye and said, "You truly believed I was going to die, didn't you?" Emily's eyes widened in confusion. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "I'm not dying. Not anymore," Madison said, now standing to her feet, strength surging through her body. "I never had cancer, Emily. The hospital made a mistake, and I decided to keep quiet and see what you would do. And now I know." Emily staggered back, speechless. "But you see," Madison continued, her voice now firm and steady, "while you were out trying to gather my properties, the woman you tried so hard to poison me against was the one who fed me, cleaned my wounds, bathed me, and stayed with me through every long, painful night." Lucy entered the room quietly, pausing in shock at the scene before her. Madison turned to her with soft, grateful eyes. "Lucy, I owe you more than I can ever repay." She walked over to her, took her hand, and turned to the lawyer waiting nearby. "Prepare a new document. I want to transfer the management of one of my companies to Lucy. She will be the director, and make sure it states clearly that the position is permanent." Emily screamed, "You can't do that." "Oh, I can," Madison said, her voice cold, "and I will. Because I've finally opened my eyes to see who truly cares and who only came for the vulture's feast." Madison hugged Lucy tightly. "From now on, I'll only surround myself with people who love me when I have nothing." And with that, the once feared Madison began to rebuild her life and business. She came back with a bang, rising like a phoenix who had tasted ashes and learned which fires were worth burning for. Her first step was to cut ties with Miracle Center Church and the pastor. She exposed the manipulation and financial exploitation, filing an official complaint with the authorities and warning others never to fall into the same trap. The media had a field day. The pastor fled the country, her empire of deceit crumbling like dust. One evening, Madison hosted a small family dinner. No press, no executives, no influential guests. Just her brother Eric, his wife Lucy. Madison wiped her eyes, quietly overcome by emotion. "I was blind," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But God used my sickness to open my eyes. Not everyone who shouts your name in the crowd loves you. But some, like you, Lucy, love in silence." She turned to her brother Eric, who had tears in his eyes. "I thank God for bringing your wife into this family. If not for her, I might have died lonely and bitter." Emily, on the other hand, tried everything possible to claw her way back into her sister's life. She sent long apology messages, faked tears over voice notes, and even tried to use family elders to intervene. But Madison responded with only one sentence. "I forgive you, Emily, but I don't think I want you in my space, not now. I will always support you, no matter what." Emily read the message, broken. She never knew that life would expose her greed and bitterness in such a public and humiliating way. Her carefully crafted mask of concern had fallen off completely, and for the first time in her life, she had to face the truth. She had lost her sister, not to death, but to her own betrayal. The big lesson in this story is that truth always comes out, no matter how long it takes. A person's real character shows up when things are hard, not when life is easy. Greed, jealousy, and lies might win for a short time, but in the end, the truth always brings them down. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below to share your thoughts. See you in the next video, and don't forget to share it with friends and family who love heartfelt tales.